This video discusses the system setup. This is something that needs to be done prior to you doing the other imports or daily transactions. So off our main menu under the Maintenance tab, we have System Setup. You select System Setup and we'll start with the first screen. Do you want to see a tip of the day? It's up to you. If a little box will come up and tell you a little software tip. Enter equals tab key. Recommend that. Calendar date starts on a Monday. I usually do that in the times. Definitely load the printer form settings on startup. This will load all your true type fonts, so when you're printing your documents using the true type fonts, it doesn't have to look at the hard drive and reload them for every printing. They're loaded into memory. Allow retention of credit card tokens. This is PCI compliant, and it'll allow you to keep credit cards on file for your customers, and it's impossible to see what that card information is because they're tokenized. Activate map point integration. Microsoft has discontinued MapPoint, so this is no longer in effect. I'm going to track my sales commissions. I'm going to pay the commissions off my profit. I'm going to use my actual cost. Or I can do it off my selling price, the full price less a percentage for the commission. Here is where you can set up sounds. If they don't see a skew, it makes noises like ding dong or ah. So I just erase all those. And here you can set up your background colors. Under transactions, assign the invoice number at the end of the transaction. Highly recommended. That way you don't see any gaps in the invoice when you're sitting through an audit. Skip prompt for the PO number. That is if you don't want to be asked what the PO number is on every sale. So I usually leave that alone, and if I ever get tired of seeing that PO request pop up, I can just click that. This is a system-wide selection. This is not a workstation by workstation selection. Allow packages. Packages are when you're selling multiple items under one price for a package. Allow back orders on the invoice or take from pending before you back order. I usually leave those unchecked. I just say pay when received or invoice when received. Group back orders on the printed invoice. I rarely do that, but you can have those all be at the bottom so the customer knows what's back ordered. Show the picture on the screen. In our system, we've loaded all the pictures of products for our customers, and they'll show up on the customer display screens at the counter. Also, it'll show up on your salesman screens in the back room. Decimal points, pretty self-explanatory. I've got the all set for 0 here for default order days, default service day. That usually means the end of the month. Here's where you set your current invoice number if you're starting your new system, and your current order that you've left off from your old system. You continue on with the numbering sequence. At the start of a transaction, you can ask for an email address, ask for a phone number, ask for a zip code, and ask for a text number if you want to SMS text a customer that their order is in, come pick it up. Here's where you can set up for your employees who can't change prices. You can set up a small percentage that if the price falls within that percentage window, they can go ahead and change that price. Alert if you're selling it below cost. That's a very powerful feature, and only a supervisor can come over and override that ability to sell below cost. On your customers, we're skipping the prompt for the authorized buyer. We are alerting the customer has pending transactions. So if somebody calls in the morning and orders something, and later on the owner calls, orders the same thing, you can tell them that it's already been handled by his manager and not order the same thing 2 times. And we default to customer assigned sales ID when we're invoicing. When we're creating a new transaction, we want to set the ship to address for, I always say ask, not the default address or the store pickup. Ask which one you want, and a window will pop up for that. Tendering, these are pretty much driver's license over a certain amount. Do not prompt for change when redeeming a gift certificate. Leave the money on the gift certificate. Customer name required if they're going to return something. That way you can call them back if you find something missing in the box when they returned it. Rounding to the nearest 5 cents. You have to check with your state and find out if the state will allow you to do this kind of rounding. And of course the nomenclature. Some of our Canadian companies use check spelled differently than CHECK. Service orders. Sub-owner is if I sell something, let's say a range, to a restaurant and they outgrow it and they turn around and sell it to another restaurant, will we support our agree to our warranty if they weren't the original buyers? So if we say support the sub-owner, that warranty will stay in effect when it moves to the ownership to the new owner from who we originally sold it to. Do not print the service notes. Usually on service notes, we don't want to show those on the invoice. That's internal. Same thing when you do a quote. Do you want to always do a standard quote, a service quote, or ask which one it is? Shipping, we support WorldShip and Starship for UPS and Federal Express. When we print, we have a check validation Epson printer, for example, that will look at the check information, take the money out of the customer's account, and give the customer their check back after it prints a bunch of stuff on the back of the check that it's been processed. You can say on Use Saved where you'll calculate how much money they got in discounts, and it'll print at the bottom of their receipts. Prompts, these are user definable prompts. Like on this one here, I've got this set up to go to jobs. So on this one here, I'm saying I want to put a note. So I could put a page-long description about this job and all its specifics. And then the next ones are just fields that are text fields that are I think it's 50 characters per field, that you can have this prompt up on your entry screens, and then that information can be put on all your documents and reports. And we do that at transaction start, and I'm only doing it for job cost. I'm not doing it for the other modules. Entry options, I always like to activate advanced searches. I want to search for my vendor part number if I'm using different part numbers. Search for a customer phone number. And if I don't find an entry, what should I do? Jump directly to, for example, inventory. Go right to the inventory lookup. Customers, I want to do lookups by name, not by lookup code. Default terms are typically none, and then we can override that to be whatever the terms code that we want to have for that customer. I don't bother tracking area codes, but you can if you want, if they give you their phone numbers. Auto-generate customer code from the phone number. If you click that and get the customer's phone number, it'll create a lookup code. Tax group is based on shipping address. This is called destination tax. So it's not the same sales tax as your store. If you're shipping it out of state or another part of the state and county, they may have a different taxing rate, and each of those ship tos can have their own tax rate. Use the zip code lookups when entering customers for information. Skip the city state, so it goes right to the zip code. You type it in and the city or state pops up automatically. Default address format, we're using US or Canada. For our inventory, we are tracking inventory quantities, except for things like service and those we do in the individual inventory items, where we turn off the tracking, because it's an item you can't touch, feel. It's a service. Allow the sales before receiving the PO. In other words, we can pre-sell stuff that we don't have in stock yet, or the guy's holding it in his hand and he's saying, what do you mean you don't have it in stock? I'm holding it. So that allows you to sell that, and then when our accounting department gets those PO receivers in, it'll net out against the pre-sold. Allow duplicate SKUs. We do that if ever we wanted to group things together. For example, in the kitchen equipment industry, we may have things like blenders. So I can put blender as an alternate SKU, and when I select that, I'll get a list of 15 different blenders. So that helps me in grouping things together by their specialty. We also put in the UPC codes in those alternate SKUs. I'm not going to hide the long description. I am going to allow upper and lower case in my description. I'm going to allow spaces in my SKU. They say if you're using e-commerce that you shouldn't allow that, but it works. So when I'm doing an item lookup, I want to look up by SKU because I'm using barcode scanners and I want it to look that one rather than descriptions. If I'm doing trade-ins, you can set them to be inactive when you add a trade-in, and a trade-in always gives you the ability to sell or pop a window up that if you sell a new item, it'll tell you you've got used items in stock and what the prices and pictures and cost would be. I do want to use pictures in inventory. Matrix items, if you're selling things like aprons with different colors and sizes, they're all the same price, you can set up a matrix system with a parent and then all the different sizes and colors as children. On pricing, you set your decimal points. Pricing is 2 decimal points. Quantity is none, so whole quantity. And cost for decimal places is 2. When we do our markups, we're doing a markup over our cost. And if we are going to hide the sell price in the barcode, we can put that information before and after, and it'll allow us to, this is usually for bulk items that have the same item, but it's got all different kinds of quantities, and so we'll have different prices. Here's where you set up all your price descriptions. We get 6 individual price breaks, and then say, well, with a quick sale, use number 2, which is our price, but if it's a customer, default to number 3, which is wholesale. Serial numbers, we do track serial numbers in service. Serial numbers when receiving a PO. Allow duplicate serial numbers, it'll happen. Prompt for serial numbers when you complete a transaction, and I say prompt when we do an invoice or an order, because maybe with an order we want the warehouse to pull the oldest item out rather than the newest one on top. Trade-ins, we talked about if you want to keep track of your trade-ins. Invoicing, again, the default item lookup is the SKU, and if we have the negative inventory turned on, just prompt to say it's here, and that'll let us pre-sell it. Allocations, when you're converting a quote to a sales order, do you want me to allocate items from our existing stock? Do you want me to back all the items or prompt? And then when adding items to pending back order, all items are automatically pulled from our inventory if we have it, or when I create a PO, I want to fill the PO with everything that was on that sales order. So that will not touch my existing inventory. Purchase orders, if you are using matrix, you can use grids. The methods of creating a PO number can be a date, the number of that on that date, so it'd be 12/31/2017. Number 7, that's the 7th PO of that date. and then the 3-digit sales ID. Or you could do it sequentially, or say no autofill, I'll manually put my own numbers in. And then when you receive it, prompt immediately for serial numbers. I don't usually put a prompt to confirm prices if the cost went up. Alert when a back order has arrived on an existing sales order. Include landed cost if you wish in receiving, so you could capitalize your freight into the actual cost of the item to have a landed cost in inventory. When you update the cost, should we update the vendor's inventory cost and the item cost, or just the vendor cost, or just the item cost, or skip it? This is for auto quotes. It's the ability for us to find out what the freight companies are doing with our shipments. Positive for restaurant equipment is the only one that has this functionality. Omit vendors, SKUs, fields in the PO. I usually leave that alone. And use the grid. I don't touch that either. Do not allow duplicate items on a PO. Sometimes when you're doing a PO for multiple orders, you can have duplicate line numbers. So I usually leave that alone. That's really there to protect you from accidentally putting the same item in twice. Print standard style POs when printing, and include notes on the PO when you're creating from a sales order. That gets dragged over into the purchase order. We're going to allocate our back orders by the date it's due, and on landed cost, we're going to use cost method to calculate our distribution of the freight costs. Tax options, we say with quick sale, use the local tax. Package sale, just use merchandise, no taxes, non-taxable. Accounts receivable, if you leave this at 0, the statements will go through the end of the month. We're going to do our aging by number of days due. Include all transactions on the statement whenever we print one. Include only transactions for the period being printed, and that would make prior outstanding invoices be a balance forward. And do not print AR with 0 balances. So I do that. And I'm using transaction-based statements, not balance forward statements. When I'm sending a refund check back to a customer, they want to know what checking account I'm going to use to cut the checks out of. And when I'm taking payments on checks that come in the mail, I want to choose which invoices, etc., to apply it against. In payables, when I cut my checks out of the system, this is the account I want to use. On my email, I select Outlook. We can use your internal email account that you may wish to use other than Microsoft Outlook. And I just say attach the PDF and attach the PDF. And HTML is just a graphical invoice in the body of the email. The PDF will put that beautiful form as an attachment. It looks much nicer. And consignments, if we are going to sell one of our customers' equipment that they brought in for us to act as auctioneers, what percentage are we going to get if we sell it? And then if we do, it'll create a payable for that customer to pay, or that vendor to pay for that equipment that we sold of his. And that's how the system setup is. So thank you for watching.